Welcome to Wisdom Talk Radio, a collaborative community of explorers in conscious living. I'm a journeyer. Part of what that means is that at heart, I'm an explorer. And that means an explorer of ideas, of cultures, of possibilities, and of our human potential. And today you get to be part of a trailblazing journey into awakened beingness, I can call it that, through the vehicle of Indian goddess archetypes. This is really a journey into your own sovereign being so that you can access your full power. So please join me, stay tuned. I'm Laurie Seymour, host of Wisdom Talk Radio and CEO and founder of the Baca Institute, home of the Inner Guidance Mastery Blueprint. Head there to discover your quantum connection with your inner guidance by taking the Quantum Connection quiz. We are each designed to connect with Source differently, and knowing your own style, your own way of doing that, is the first step of connecting with your inner guidance at a deeper level than you ever thought was possible. It's the secret to creating what you truly want in your life. I am honored today to have with me Acharya Shunya, who is a truth teller who facilitates authenticity, self-remembrance, and divine feminine pathways to awakening within. The first female head of her 2,000-year-old Indian spiritual lineage, Shunya reinterprets and recontextualizes ancient teachings for modern times. You see what I mean about you're going to take a journey. You will be in an exploration. Her way of reinterpreting this is about empowering people to lead fearless, fulfilled, and enlightened lives. She is president of Awakened Self Foundation and founder of Vedika Global, Inc., and is the author of best-selling books, Ayurveda, Lifestyle Wisdom, and Sovereign Self. Welcome, Shunya.
Laurie, it's such a pleasure. I look forward to our conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. Me too. So I want to set a stage for our listeners so that they can really journey with us on this exploration. And I think maybe one way that we could start that is if you would tell us a little bit about how the goddess archetypes have really led you to break out of your own limiting situations, whatever they might be, and particularly limiting relationships, and how that led you to writing your new book, which I will say is We're Like a Goddess. So tell us a little about that.
I was born in India, and we revere the goddess. In India, the concept of divinity is quite out of the box. Mm-hmm. And while we believe in a boundless, formless, unitary consciousness as God, this supreme intelligence can express itself through masculine, feminine, and even fluid gender forms. So the divine feminine was not a new concept, but something that felt familiar. And I grew up with goddesses, specifically the goddess Durga, who represents courage, Lakshmi, who represents prosperity, abundance, playfulness, and Saraswati, who represents intuition and wisdom. And I saw that these goddesses were not only revered in my home, but they were a trans-India phenomena. And then I saw how the goddesses had inspired Buddhism too, and Sikhism and Jainism and all these religions, along with Hinduism that had emerged in the heartland of India. Mm-hmm. And then as I was growing up, I was facing challenges, as any young woman would in any part of the world. No matter how progressive her family is, or how educated she is, or how contemporary her thinking is, patriarchy has come to stay on our planet.
Mhm.
It's a product of false beliefs, but it has a tenacious hold on too many minds and too many hearts. And I kept meeting some walls, especially in my first marriage, and just in various things. Also, just being a female spiritual teacher of an all
Mhm.
male spiritual lineage up till now. And I remembered how these goddesses in their mythology were unapologetic, they were fierce, they were passionate, they were bold. And then I didn't want to just revere them, I wanted to be them. I
Yes.
wanted to talk like them, walk like them, mate like them. I wanted to roar like them. And roaring is like finding your authentic voice, your opinion, your expression, and truly being like a lioness in my human jungle.
Mhm.
And probably that is when I brought the goddesses that I had grown up with a few notches down to meet me. And I uplifted humankind, womankind, a few notches above to be them.
Mhm.
And that's how I gave birth to this theory. I haven't heard what I write about anywhere. I've heard stories, but I haven't heard the interpretation that I provide. All this happened, Laurie, in the laboratory of my life, and I think you would understand what that means.
That's really, in a way, I would say the only place that we really have as a laboratory is our own life, our own inner being. And when we're willing to do the exploration, to do the inner research, so that we come to a new place of understanding and of living, that's where we get to know you've got something real. And it feels like what you're saying is this really changed your life.
It did. It did. Like when my lips would be sealed because I was afraid that what I speak would have consequences, I would remember some goddess stories in which they spoke the truth. And despite all my resistances, I would utter the truth, despite any consequence. And that is how I became a truth teller. And that is how I realized that no matter what the consequence, there is too much growth and too much light
Hmm. Hmm.
in being yourself, and that nothing should hold you back.
And,
And being a
and
goddess is not about being angry, it's just
right,
about being
okay.
real. Yeah.
Yes. And if we're going to change, if the world is going to change, if the world is going to grow into what it can be, it's got to start somewhere. And it feels
Well,
like you have had the courage. You've had Durga's courage to step into this in a new way.
it is said that these stories are magical, and it's interesting that my mother, who didn't live very long,
Hmm.
um, I was only 10 when she transitioned from her body due to a congenital heart condition. But prior to that, every time I insisted on a bedtime story, which was pretty much every night, she would tell me these remarkable stories, which were probably too much for a young child, but maybe my mother knew that she didn't
Hmm.
have much time, and so she dramatized them because she also loved theater. And uh, and what happened was that I started imagining myself as a diva in my own life.
Wow.
And then when in my 20s and 30s my life didn't reflect any of that imagination,
Mm.
I had to I had to bring those stories into my life. I had to face those demons of self-doubt and guilt and unnecessary shame and blame that we women do tend to carry around
Hmm.
into my life. And I have to say, Laurie, that sometime in my mid 30s, I settled down in America, and I thought, oh, good, we're done. We're not no longer going to face patriarchy.
Ha.
And what a wake up call that was. Yeah.
Yeah. And so how did you deal with that? Because that could have been quite a rude awakening.
Well, I got angrier in the beginning. I got angrier, and now I got angrier for all the women I met because I've been a healer and a teacher for some time.
Mhm.
And gradually I got to have conversations with women and people of non-binary genders and even men,
Mhm.
where patriarchy suffocates men too and everyone
Yes.
to meet
Yes.
these rigid typecast rules.
It's,
And
it's why I'm glad you said that, because it's really why I didn't want to start out by saying, "Hey, this episode is for women." It's not.
no,
It's for human
no,
beings.
yeah, yeah. It's like we all cooked up this false belief and then we're all struggling because of it.
Hmm.
And men can't connect with their inner feminine. I mean, we women to that extent have connected with our inner masculine, especially
Hmm.
those of us who are enabled and out there. But men, they're mocked and teased
Hmm.
and ridiculed for shedding a tear or expressing an emotion. And this is all patriarchy. And it forces us to lead false lives, pretentious lives, scripted lives.
Hmm. Hmm. And you are
Yeah.
so focused and supporting that journey into being who we really are, into that truth.
I'm not sure if I was focused. I think I'm focused now.
That's
I
what I
think
mean
back then I was tormented.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was tormented and broken, and I was thunderously angry. But
Mhm.
there's something tenacious about me, Laurie. You must have met women like me.
Yeah.
We don't give up, and we may have a bad day, a bad year, a bad decade, but we come back roaring, and that's just what it is. And I'm one of those.
Mm. So I want to come back to all of that, and this is more of to some extent, a personal inquiry, and that's about how you came to be the head of this 2,000-year-old lineage, and how did that intersect with your own journey?
How I came to be ahead of that was pure karma. I was born in this lineage.
Hmm.
And my ancestors have been renowned teachers. They still are.
Hmm.
They're very well known in India. And I was born in this family, and my grandfather had already opened his school and his wisdom school and his teachings to the girl child 30 years before I came along on earth,
Hmm.
as if he was waiting for me. And from my birth, he gave me extra attention. In fact, when I was very young, like 5 or 6, he told me I'll travel abroad and establish institutions of spiritual education. And I didn't know what abroad meant, like in our language.
Of course.
So I thought he would put me on a boat and I'd like, somehow drift away to Sri Lanka or something. I didn't even
Mhm.
know that USA existed when I was a little child. My world was so small. But he knew. So I think I was born to a self realized master.
It sounds like.
That's what people called him. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
And amongst many other potential male candidates, his other students, my brothers, my cousins, he chose me and he
Mhm.
believed in me before I could believe in myself. And he gave me the knowledge and the wisdom. So I had all of that. I had the mantle of the tradition and the system.
Mhm.
And I heard some murmur of like, what is he doing? Has this man lost his what's
Um,
happened?
mhm. Mhm.
But he chose me. But then he passed soon after. He transitioned, and I was left in this with this new mantle and a new marriage that was not working out because we're not a monk lineage, we're not celibates,
Mhm.
we're a householder lineage. There are two kinds of lineages in the Hindu tradition. One is the married and one is the celibate, and
Ah,
we are the householder lineage, so we take on lovers and partners and
uh-huh.
husbands and wives. So I had this new marriage and I had this new mantle, and I thought, well, let me work on the marriage because it's immediate, and then I'll slowly work on, taking my lineage forward. But then the marriage, I lost my way because while karma had endowed me with a guru and knowledge, Karma also made sure that from a relationship perspective, Laurie, I was so I was so raw. I I I was so raw. Like some souls, they ace every relationship, and some souls blunder through all of them. I was a blunderer. I didn't understand. I couldn't keep up appearances. I didn't know how to seduce or manipulate. I didn't know any of that. Really, I was meant to be an acharya, a teacher, a master teacher. And when that marriage fell apart, I internalized shame, guilt, blame, which I see that women worldwide do.
Absolutely.
And it was really then that I focused on my lineage. And it was hard enough to be the first female head of the lineage and now a divorced one in a family that hadn't seen a divorce in 2000 years.
Wow.
So I was really wearing the crown, wasn't I?
You
But I did it
accepted
all.
something. You did it. You did it. And it's
I
so
did
funny.
it and I did it with ease. Yeah.
Wow. And
Yeah.
grace. It feels like if you
Absolutely. And
hadn't done that, if you hadn't had those experiences, you wouldn't have this teaching that we're talking about today of roar like a goddess. You wouldn't
well,
have
I wouldn't be in conversation with you, Laurie.
right.
I wouldn't be in a conversation with you. I
Hmm.
would be busy towing the line somewhere in some corner of India, being the perfect wife and being a grateful spiritual teacher who had been given permission to teach.
Wow.
Instead, I'm on the world stage today. Yeah.
Huh. That is very potent. And the potency that I'm hearing, excuse me, excuse me, just one moment.
Yeah, please take your time.
The potency that I'm hearing is of we are given permission in a certain sort of way to be a certain sort of person. And when we also know that there is so much more, even from beyond, even from within a spiritual tradition, then it takes great courage to step outside of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It also takes great darkness to step out of it into light. Like when you've seen the depth of darkness, you're so ready for light.
Mm.
You're so ready for it. And I've seen the depth of darkness not just outside me, but inside me. And I've seen despair, I've seen depression. And that's why I'm the kind of teacher who can talk about enlightenment and depression and know that this is part of the human experience. And I coined the term enlightened vulnerability, which is what I represent.
Speak
And,
about that,
and
about enlightened vulnerability.
well, people were either vulnerable, and they form like they are the seekers, the students,
Mm-hmm.
and then the teachers that I came across were always enlightened with a hello, which made me sick.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw myself, and I realized, well, there's a while I'm enlightened, I'm vulnerable, and while I'm vulnerable, I have enlightenment, I have
Mm-hmm.
knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted to carry both of them together. So I
Wow.
had to coin this term to explain people like me. And I feel, Laurie, from just talking to you, that it may describe you too, where
It,
we don't hesitate to owe up to our vulnerability, but
mm-hmm.
we're not victims. We're just vulnerable because of our
Mm-hmm.
humanity.
It's yes, it's part of the human experience. And it's when we don't,
Yeah,
when we
yeah.
put ourselves forward as not necessarily even perfect, but as not having that full range, it's really becomes dangerous because people adopt rather a way of being and a way of thinking about themselves that feels like they're always going to be less than because they're trying to hold on to some image. And I feel like you have granted permission by your way of being.
Thank you, because I had this permission to totally pretend to be twice born, have a
Mhm.
halo, like a real bona fide halo. I
Mhm.
have a lot of privileges and entitlement being the Acharya of an ancient lineage. I have students who look up to me, revere me, and I could totally lead this pretentious, false life.
Mhm.
And and yet I choose to speak about what injured me and wounded me because it's important for my students to know that that happens, and yet there is resilient hope and eternal potential within you, which I call the goddess potential,
Mm.
that can be awakened and brought into your daily life and relationships.
So,
Yeah.
boy, this is something that I didn't know that I would be asking you about, but I feel moved to right now, and that's about mm, the whole not lineage, but the experience of guru-ness and student. And it may be my own limited understanding, and so that's why I want to bring this out, is that there have been people that have tried to, certainly with my teacher, make her into a guru. We would, we would all sometimes do that, and in one way or another, you are this and we are not. And she never wanted to take on that mantle because her teaching was about how each of us hold that within ourselves. And it's up to us to discover the ways of being able to connect with that, being able to live that, being able to receive our own connection and our own inner guidance. And so that has certainly been my teaching. And when someone wants to look to me for not so much for guidance, but for the answers, there's a turning around of that onto, let's see how you can step into that. And I'm hearing you speak to this in the way that you're shifting I want to say the archetype of a guru. Do you know what I'm speaking to or what I'm asking
I
about?
am. I am.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say that the guru phenomena, the Swami phenomena,
Mm-hmm.
especially as it emerged from India, I think this is a more recent phenomena, like the last 150 years, like the larger than life
Mm-hmm.
phenomena, which partly technology and media and newspapers. And then when the Indian gurus traveled abroad and they were so exotic,
Mm-hmm.
that and the way the Westerners drooled over them,
Mm-hmm.
that I think it was ripe to create a distorted guru phenomena. But if
Um,
you go back to traditional lineages like mine, a guru is just a respected elder. Like you would go to Columbia or Harvard or Stanford or Maryland, University of Maryland, and respect a professor.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They are equals, but they're one among equals
Mm-hmm.
because they are a professor. In the same way, a guru in it is a professor of Hindu philosophy and Hindu practices and Hindu teachings,
Ah.
also known as Vedic practices.
Mm-hmm.
And they would be humble, they would often be married, they would be just, like family people.
Mm-hmm.
And the students would graduate, and often great kings and prince and princesses would come study with them, and they would lead humble lives with the guru and then depart to their palaces, and the
Mm-hmm.
guru would continue where they were. And it was like the more elevated they were in their consciousness, the more non-pretentious they were.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so there was no need to unguru yourself, because a guru literally means, gu means darkness and ru means light. So a guru was an expert in helping you shed your darkness and bring in light. And then this phenomena got distorted. And then there was so much projection. So it was not just one way. It was not just like the
Mm-hmm.
gurus were clever and were taking advantage. The students also are gullible and projecting a lot on the guru.
Absolutely.
A
Absolutely.
lot. Yeah.
Yes.
So what I decided in my life was that I'm a guru to, I think, 5 students
Mm.
up till now. Many call me their guru, but I'm not their guru. I'm just their teacher or their
Mhm.
guide or their author or their friend,
Mhm.
inspiration, archetype. But a guru student relationship is intimate. It's based on confidence, not sexual intimacy,
Mhm.
but on trust, on agreements that while our self is the same, we're equals at
Mhm.
a soul level. I'll get to play the role of giving you knowledge, and you will take the knowledge in this lifetime.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so there is no power games in true guru seeker relationships. And so I stepped away because for a while there, I was just sitting there exposed, and people come to a personality like me, they're like, please take me on as your student.
Right.
And then suddenly I'm taking on everybody's dysfunctionality,
Mhm.
adoration, addictions, and infatuations, which
Mhm.
as a roaring goddess teacher, I'm like, no, thank you.
Yes.
But I have 5 students that I'm very proud of, and I'm training them and guiding them, and they're also teaching
Mm.
alongside me.
Mhm.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for speaking to that because it's been such a thing, particularly in the West. And you spoke to that of how that came to be and the really the lack of balance, the lack of truth, I'll say it that way, when there is that sense of adoration that is a giving up of self.
Yeah, giving away your power to your guru to decide for you,
Mm-hmm.
adulating them. None of this was required. This is not normal. This was not present until 150 years ago. This is more recent phenomenon.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
So I want to shift in another direction because you speak about righteous anger. And I remember a long time ago having a vocal teacher who would talk about putting on the full armor of God in certain situations, carrying the spear and being the warrior. And and I loved it because there are those times where it is so important to have that righteous anger, which is different than self-righteous anger. Could you?
Oh, yeah. Self-righteous is a slippery slope. I mean, sometimes we have to be self-righteous, but then we have to examine that more closely because sometimes the ego can get self-righteous at the
Mhm.
drop of a hat.
Yes.
But righteous anger is dharmic anger, ethical anger. It is usually it includes the good of all or a great number of people.
Mhm.
And and for too long, I think the one thing that I got really conscious about was like I shouldn't get angry because anger was my first response to injustice, but then I was shamed for being angry.
Mhm.
Uh,
Was
and
that
then I
because you
saw
were a woman? I mean, because
only
women
because
don't
I
get
was a
angry?
woman,
Okay.
only because I was a woman.
Mhm.
And then I saw how even in America, an angry woman is a hag or a bitch or a nag.
Mhm.
And if we have a female presidential candidate, she's angry. And if we have a male presidential candidate, he has good opinions. So I saw how a woman's anger, the anger of people of color, the anger of people with fluid genders and non binary genders, that was considered dangerous. And only the anger of certain men of a certain class and certain prestige, that anger was good. That was going to liberate us. That was going to set things right on the planet.
Mhm.
And I realized that there was anger politics going on, and so what the categorization I wanted to bring forward in my book around anger was unconscious anger, which
Mhm.
we all want to avoid, where we are just being enlightened and we are throwing tantrums and we're just being big babies and we're, just,
Mhm.
yeah, we're just,
Mhm.
we're, yeah, and we've all been there and we have to avoid that. It makes us sick and
It does.
unhappy.
Yeah.
But there is conscious anger that as a woman, I had to go back and turn on that button. And sometimes I'm still groping for it. It's like,
Mm.
wait, should I be angry? Like I have to question that.
Mm-hmm.
because it's been so conditioned to not show up, and what comes up is stoicism and peacefulness and adaptation and acceptance and
Mm-hmm.
generosity and forgiveness and contentment and angels and chakras and everything, you name it, but anger. And so sometimes I have to grope for it. So that's
Mm-hmm.
conscious anger, which sometimes say you get angry with how you're eating your food and how you're developing hypertension, then that's going to
Mm-hmm.
make you exercise and go on a diet plan. But anger informs us of our boundaries or something's not right. So we can suppress anger in an entire gender, and that's not good for our planet. And then lastly, there's superconscious anger, from which I wrote the book. It
Mm-hmm.
was not even about me, because by the time I wrote the book, Laurie, I'm leading a very privileged and happy and calm and successful life.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote this because I'm angry for everyone who has been disempowered, marginalized, or asked to take a back seat. Yeah.
And so when you say that, boy, when you say that, Shunya, what I feel is the the way in which that righteous anger, that superconscious anger, really is giving voice to the previously voiceless.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Very true.
And you spoke about just now about boundaries, and that was something else that I wanted to ask you about is um, the setting of, the maintaining of our boundaries, the ability to know where we stop and someone else begins, where someone else's situation is not our own. That is so important. I mean, when in every aspect of life, in our business life, in our families, how does all of the work of establishing our own self-worth play into or be allowed, be taught from within the Vedas? How does that influence these relationships?
Yeah, I see a lot of teaching in the Vedas on, there's a lot of psychology in the Vedas.
Mm-hmm.
And I see a lot of teachings on like how a river has boundaries and how she respects it, and that is why the river banks are there intact, because whenever she supersedes her own boundary, there are floods and mass scale destruction. So
Mm-hmm.
how everything in nature is intelligent and knows how to dwell within a boundary. And the boundary is not so much even about exerting a wall of weapons for another person. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
cross this boundary and you're gonna suffer. It's more about, do you live in your own boundaries? Like and the more you live with boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
so you're non-violently dwelling in your own boundaries, so that you're not violating another sentient creature's rights
Mm-hmm.
and needs, the more you then have standards and you expect the same from others.
Mm.
It's like the more you give, the more you become sensitized to boundaries. I'm a boundary filled person. I speak in moderation. I don't rape people just because I can talk. I rape them with my speech. You know how
Mm-hmm.
people go on and on and on? Or I won't. So I use the word rape because I feel as violated when people just talk, 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 talk. And just because they have my audience, they just talk, talk, talk. I'm like, this is like a rape.
Yeah.
You just violated me.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, right. So in my
I have
speech,
never thought of it that way, but yes. Yes,
it
indeed.
feels like that
Mm-hmm.
sometimes. You're
Mm-hmm.
arrested and they're just going on and on and on. So I realized I didn't like that, but then that made me look at my own conversational boundaries.
Mm.
And then the more you live with them, then the more you expect them. And I'm just going to conclude this, Laurie, that there is a basic confusion in us humans about our primordial relationship, which is with our own self.
Mm-hmm.
Because we were this self before we took on this body, and we will be this self after we discard this body. And we need to have a primordial relationship with this, whereas all our secondary relationships They come and go. And as a result, boundaries are needed to have a hygiene in relationships.
Mm.
And the Roar Like a Goddess talks a lot about how the goddesses insisted upon this hygiene 10,000 years ago in timelessness.
In absolutely timeless. What are some of those potent legends that are so appropriate for us in our so-called modern times?
I think every legend was the ones that I shared, and then I shared some contemporary case studies and examples from my students' lives. So they felt very potent. But a couple of them really like brought home the message. For example, there is one legend in which the goddess visits her family and she feels disrespected. She's the daughter of human parents in one birth, in one avatar, and she feels disrespected and she discards that body in front of them. She emerges from that body like a bolt of lightning and ascends into the heaven and disappears, and that body just falls to the earth in ashes. And I thought, this is so macabre and so gruesome. And why is my mom telling me this story? But then my mother would say, and then Shunya, as the goddess left, these words echoed throughout the planet, and the words were, I had told you that I am willing to be your daughter only as long as you respect me. The day you stop respecting me, the day I will stop being your daughter, and I am burning to ashes this very body that you had doted as your daughter. And this was a lot for a 9-year-old.
Oh my goodness.
But then, it allowed me to burn to tinder false agreements, false romantic infatuations, false trust. I just remember this story and I put a matchstick to it in my mind. I'm done. I'm done. And I've done this with not too many times, but I've done it at the crucial times.
Yeah.
And this was so powerful because it was a message to all daughters that even like the most trusted relationship is with your parents, but if you're not respected, then respect is number one, more than anything else. So that was a very powerful one
Can
that
you
I speak
speak to
about.
that? Can you speak to what you're meaning in this context about respect? Because I know that has different meanings and different implications for people, for different people. And
I,
so let's
I
set a
think,
base.
yeah. No, I believe when I'm speaking about the respect to our being. It's not cultural. I'm speaking about a universal respect that we deserve, where we are not made invisible, where we are not rejected or our presence made unimportant. I'm not talking about narcissistic importance. I'm
No,
just talking about, yeah, yeah. Thank
and that, but
you.
I wanted you to give that
And
voice because people can
thank
misinterpret
you.
what respect means.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Um, there are times where, for example, I'll give you an example. I had a classroom in which I had willingly agreed to show up in person. And for many years I did. And there were many grateful students. And then gradually, as time changed, technology changed, and we allowed people to watch me online too. And then, so there were more students online and less on site when I would show up. And then one time when I showed up, I realized that there were very few students physically. Everybody was online waiting for my discourse, but they were not enough. And I saw red because it was a cold, rainy day. And I had driven, or I had been driven, somebody was driving me like, almost an hour plus to show up.
Mhm.
And if I can show up, why are the others lounging on their couches to watch
Yes.
me? You know? And
Mhm.
so I just told them very quietly, I gave them the discourse. But before the discourse, I said, note this date and note this discourse, and something will change. And I went back and I didn't know what, but I knew something will change. And I had to burn to tinder that agreement that I'm just going to be your cozy up teacher, showing up for you to cozy up with me because you're not showing up anymore.
Yeah.
And if you're going to be comfortable behind a computer, then I'm going to be comfortable behind a computer. And that's exactly what I did. I ended that situation, which had been going on for a decade.
Mhm.
There were lots of tears and sorries and apologetic letters and flowers and groveling and guilt tripping and misery demonstration. We can't live without you, dear teacher.
Mhm.
Give us a second chance. But I changed not only that situation, I changed my entire life. Now I'm so exclusive, it's hard to find a way
Mm.
to converse with me.
Mhm.
So it was like I used that story because I saw disrespect
Yes.
there.
And there's a
And
disrespect of self in disrespecting you.
there you go. There you go. And so now when I show up in person anywhere, if the students have that opportunity, they're not going to miss it. So
Mhm.
I'm not saying that they were bad students. I'm not
Mhm.
saying that, but I'm saying that good relationships can become jaded and disrespect can happen either way.
Mhm.
And at that time, we need to discard whatever was familiar, like, the daughter's body was familiar. So the
Mhm.
goddess discarded it. And she, I mean, reappeared in some other body, in some other story, but
Mhm.
there you go. That's the end of it. And my mother shared that story with me again and again because maybe she too knew that my daughter will face some situations. And so, in a moment of disrespect, I honored myself
Mhm.
and I honored the knowledge that I bear. And yeah, and I
Well,
didn't do it right away. I mean, I
mhm.
gave people a few chances and then I realized that this was just being lazy.
Yes, yes. And
Yeah.
the honoring of yourself feels like the honoring of presence within you, of honoring your own life force, not of your personality.
Oh yeah, no, this is not about the ego
Mhm.
because I love those students.
Mhm.
I've been their mother-like teacher,
Mhm.
and I couldn't teach them just to bring this non-mindfulness to their journey.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
then the students followed me to wherever I travel and whatever I do now. A lot of them will, for example, log on to this conversation and listen.
Mhm. I'm so moved by how your mother was with you,
Mhm.
and what a brilliant light she was.
You know, that makes me want to acknowledge that I have revisited my mother's presence through this book
Mhm.
because she was my first storyteller,
Mhm.
and and I have cried a little bit writing this book
Mhm.
in remembering her. I mean, I thought I was done, but I
Mhm.
remembered her, and I feel so grateful that she would do these theatrical presentations at 8:30
Mhm.
p.m. at bedtime.
Yeah, I feel that. I mean, that sounds very funny
Oh,
to say and probably funnier to hear, but I feel this sense of gratitude to her.
oh, thank you. Thank you, dear sister. Thank you. Yeah.
So I know we're starting to wind up, and I have so many other things I want to ask, but could you take a few moments to speak to the Awakened Self Foundation and what that
After,
is, and how
yeah,
people can find you?
after being in the West, after um, some um, some experiments with should I be a traditional teacher? Can I be, am I a guru to many? Am I a guru to a few? Uh, I've had a beautiful churning, and beautiful souls have walked the path with me for over a decade. They have learned these teachings, and together we have founded the Awakened Self Foundation, which is a platform to really to disseminate the knowledge, the Hindu Vedic wisdom of Ayurveda, the health and healing of the body, yoga for the mind, Advaita for the soul, and divine feminine teachings for all of us, to the whole world using modern technology. This is all the fruit of me leaving that original that situation where I'd become comfortable. It's because I burned to shreds that comfort zone. I have stepped into this beautiful foundation, which is making inroads in so many places. And so, if people read my books or they hear my podcast and they want to inquire further, study further, then they come to the awakenself.com and find me there.
I will make sure to include that in the show notes so people can do that. And is your book, More Like a Goddess, is out and available?
It's out. It was released worldwide. It has done very well. It's a bestseller. And it's available both as a paperback and an audible book with lots of sound effects. And when I was recording it, my publishers just gave me, time to just speak from my heart. So it has sections which is not in the book, and sometimes I would shed tears while speaking. So it's very powerful. Both the versions are very powerful and available everywhere.
There's an energy certainly to your book. I haven't heard the audible, and I can imagine that because of the energy with which with the energy that comes through as you speak.
Yeah, it was special. I look forward to hearing your perspective because Laurie, you listen so deeply and you reflect back so beautifully. I look forward to your remarks. Yeah.
Is there anything that you would like to share with our listeners in closing? There doesn't have to be, but I just feel moved to ask.
Well, I just want to thank you for this conversation. You experience my energy and I experience yours, and I've always found that whenever I'm on podcasts or radio shows, it's always a two-way energy. And I feel the God is present between us. Do you feel her too?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm
We're both blessed.
I feel this complete kind of encircling. You're
Yeah,
somewhere on the
me
other side
too.
of the world, but it feels like you are absolutely here with me, and that we are so blessed.
We are so blessed. So in the writing of this book and becoming an ambassador of her empowering message, which is for all people, all genders, all cultures, it's timeless. I really have become uplifted and blessed, and thank you for inviting me and for creating such a comfortable, energetic space so that the goddess could be with us, because we definitely both feel her. And I'm sure our listeners can also close their eyes maybe briefly and be graced by her presence. And she's not a Hindu goddess. She's the goddess. We can just know her through different cultural attributes, just whatever you want to call her.
Yes. We don't have to separate it into anything in any
We
way, because
don't.
that would be completely antithetical to that experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I will say thank you, Acharya Shunya. I want to use your title because your title is important. Thank you. Thank you for being here at Wisdom Talk Radio. And thank you to our listeners too for being with us today here at Wisdom Talk Radio. Join us here regularly for more wisdom, discovery, and illumination. And you can find us, of course, anywhere you listen to your favorite podcasts. And if you've enjoyed listening today, please leave us a review. When you do that, when you leave a review, when you say, oh, yeah, this was special, what that does is that it helps other people discover us. It helps other people really to discover their own connection with wisdom. And that's what helps transform the world. So if you wish to find more about deepening your own inner connection, take the Quantum Connection quiz and visit us at thebacainstitute.com.
Thanks for joining us here at Wisdom Talk Radio. We wish you well in your conscious explorations. For more information and to join in the conversation, our website is wisdomtalkradio.com or at Wisdom Talk Radio on Facebook.